Have you ever been strong enough to survive the storm, but wounded enough to wonder if you'd ever be the same again? Life has a way of breaking you, breaking your plans, breaking your heart, breaking your confidence. But hear me tonight. What life breaks, faith builds. The same pressure that tried to crush you was only preparing you to carry more glory. You didn't break down, you broke through. And what the enemy meant to destroy you, God is using to develop you. There are moments in life when the breaking feels personal, not just painful, but intentional, as if everything you trusted, leaned on, or prayed for has fallen apart at the same time. You did everything right, yet things still went wrong. You showed up, stayed faithful, tried again, and still ended up wounded. And in those moments, the loudest question isn't, why does this hurt? But where is God now? Because when life breaks you, it has a way of convincing you that you've been forgotten, overlooked, or quietly pushed to the side. But let me tell you something that heaven wants you to know today. Broken does not mean abandoned. Brokenness is not God's eviction notice from your life. It is often evidence that He is closer than you think. Scripture never promised us a life without breaking. It promised us a God who would never leave us in the breaking. The enemy wants you to believe that because you're hurting, you're hidden from God. But the truth is, you're often most visible to Him when you're at your weakest. God has never confused your pain with your worth. He doesn't measure your value by how well you're holding up, but by who He created you to be. Some of the most powerful people in the Bible were introduced to us in broken seasons. Joseph was broken by betrayal long before he was elevated to leadership. David was broken in the fields before he was crowned in the palace. Hannah was broken in prayer before she ever held Samuel in her arms. Even Jesus was broken in the garden before the glory of resurrection was revealed. Brokenness is not a sign that God has stepped away. It is often the soil where purpose begins to take root. We struggle because we confuse breaking with rejection. When something falls apart, we assume God walked away. But God doesn't abandon what He allows to be broken. In fact, He often allows breaking precisely because He plans to rebuild with greater strength. Think about it. Nothing that is being thrown away is ever refined. Fire is not used to destroy gold. It is used to remove what doesn't belong. And sometimes God permits the fire not to consume you, but to clarify you. The pain you're experiencing right now is not proof that God has left you. It is proof that something in your life was too small to carry what He was about to give you. God had to let the old version break because it could not contain the new assignment. You weren't abandoned, you were being transitioned. And transitions are uncomfortable because they require letting go of what was familiar before you can fully embrace what is next. There are people listening who feel broken in private, but functional in public. You smile, serve, and show strength, but inside you are bleeding questions you don't know how to ask out loud. You've been telling yourself, if God was really with me, I wouldn't feel like this. But feelings are not facts. Faith is not the absence of pain. It is the confidence that God is still present in it. The psalmist said, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Not after the valley. Not when it's over. In it, God is not intimidated by your broken places. He doesn't need you to be whole before He shows up. He specializes in entering situations that look impossible and people who feel unusable. The cracks you're trying to hide are the very places His light shines through. When life breaks you, it strips away illusions of control so you can finally see the God who has been carrying you all along. Sometimes we want God to fix what's broken, but God wants to reveal what was false. Some relationships break because they were never meant to last. Some plans collapse because they were built on your strength instead of His will. And while it hurts to lose what you thought was permanent, it is mercy to lose what would have limited you. God never abandons you. He abandons what would destroy you. You may feel discarded, but God does His best work with what others throw away. He picked David from obscurity, Gideon from fear, Moses from exile. God doesn't consult your wounds to determine your destiny. He looks past the damage and sees the design. And what life calls broken, God calls chosen. So if you are standing in a season where everything feels fragile, hear this clearly: God is still there. He is in the silence, in the confusion, in the tears you cry when no one is watching. He has not left you behind. He is rebuilding you from the inside out, stronger, deeper, and more anchored than before. You are broken, but you are not abandoned. And the same God who walked with you into the storm is still standing with you as he prepares to lead you out. There is a kind of pressure that doesn't come to improve you, but to crush you, or at least that's how it feels when you're in it. Pressure has a way of closing in on every side, squeezing your options, tightening your breath, and forcing you to confront limits you didn't know you had. You pray for relief, you ask God to remove it, and yet the pressure remains. Not because God is absent, but because pressure is often the tool he uses to reveal what is hidden inside you. What feels like an attack is frequently an assignment in disguise. We tend to see pressure as punishment, but God often uses it as preparation. Nothing valuable is produced without it. Diamonds don't appear without intense pressure. Oil doesn't flow without crushing. Grapes don't become wine without being pressed. In God's economy, pressure is not wasted, it is invested. The weight you are carrying right now is not random. It is connected to where God is taking you. If there were no purpose, there would be no pressure. Pressure exposes the difference between who we pretend to be and who we truly are. When life is easy, faith can be casual, but when pressure arrives, everything superficial gets stripped away. You discover what you really trust, what you really believe, and what you've been leaning on that cannot hold you anymore. Pressure has a way of revealing whether your foundation is built on comfort or conviction. And while that exposure is uncomfortable, it is also necessary. God cannot build a strong future on a weak core. Many people walk away when pressure shows up, not realizing that they are leaving right before the breakthrough. Pressure is often the last test before promotion. Joseph was pressured in the pit, in Potiphar's house, and in prison. Yet every season of pressure was shaping the leader he would become. Esther was pressured with a decision that could cost her life, but that pressure positioned her to save a nation. Even Jesus faced pressure in the wilderness and in Gethsemane before stepping fully into his purpose. Pressure does not mean you are off course. It often means you are right on schedule. What pressure does is force you to rely on God instead of your own strength. When you still have options, you still try to fix things yourself, but pressure removes the illusion of control. It corners you into prayer, pushes you into dependence, and drives you to a deeper level of faith. You stop trusting in what you can do and start trusting in who God is. And that shift is where growth happens. Pressure breaks pride so purpose can breathe. Some of the frustration you feel right now is not because you're failing, but because you're being stretched. Growth always comes with tension. Muscles only grow when they are stressed. Faith only grows when it is tested. Purpose only develops when it is challenged. God is expanding your capacity, and expansion is never comfortable. You are being enlarged to carry more responsibility, more influence, and more impact. The pressure is proof that what God is forming in you is bigger than what you've known before. We often ask God to take the pressure away, but God is asking us to let the pressure do its work. If he removed every uncomfortable season, we would never mature. If he rescued us too quickly, we would remain shallow. Pressure teaches patience, endurance, and perseverance. It trains your spirit to stand when everything else is shaking. And once you've learned how to stand under pressure, you cannot be easily moved. The enemy wants pressure to make you quit, but God intends for it to make you qualified. What feels like resistance is actually resistance training. You are building strength you will need later. The battle you're fighting now is preparing you for a level you're about to reach. God never elevates people who have not been tested. Pressure proves you can handle what you've been praying for. There are moments when pressure makes you question your calling. You start wondering if you heard God wrong, if you missed a sign, if you should turn back. But purpose is often confirmed by pressure, not comfort. If you were not a threat to the enemy, there would be no resistance. If there were no assignment on your life, there would be no opposition. Pressure is evidence that your life carries weight in the spirit realm. So instead of asking, "Why is this so hard?" begin to ask, "What is this producing in me?" because God is not wasting this season. He is refining your character, strengthening your faith, and aligning your heart with His will. The pressure you feel today is shaping the purpose you will walk in tomorrow. And when you come out on the other side, you will realize that what tried to break you actually built you. The pressure did not destroy you. It developed you, and it prepared you to step fully into everything God created you to be. There are seasons when faith does not feel strong, confident, or victorious. It feels fragile, stretched thin, and barely holding on. These are the moments when life fractures your expectations and leaves you standing in the gap between what you believed would happen and what actually did. Disappointment cracks the surface of your heart, loss creates fault lines in your spirit, and unanswered prayers leave you wondering if faith still works the way you were taught. Yet it is in these very fractures that faith does its deepest growing. Faith is not born in comfort, it is forged in the breaking. We often imagine faith as something that shines brightest when everything is going well. But biblical faith has always been shaped in the shadows. Abraham's faith grew when the promise seemed impossible. Moses' faith matured in the wilderness, not in Pharaoh's palace. Elijah's faith deepened not on the mountaintop alone, but in the cave where he felt afraid and alone. Faith does not avoid the fracture, it moves into it. The cracks in your life are not the end of your belief. They are the opening through which faith matures. Fractures expose what surface-level faith can hide. When everything is intact, it is easy to say you trust God. But when things fall apart, trust becomes a decision instead of a feeling. The fracture strips away borrowed faith, inherited faith, and performative faith, leaving you with a raw and personal encounter with God. You stop repeating what you've heard and start clinging to what you know. Faith becomes less about appearances and more about survival. In the fracture, faith learns how to breathe without guarantees. You no longer have timelines, clear answers, or predictable outcomes. All you have is God's presence and His promises, and even those can feel distant. Yet this is where faith becomes resilient. It learns to stand without applause, to pray without immediate results, and to hope without visible evidence. Faith grows muscles in the fracture, muscles that cannot be developed in ease. Many people assume that doubt is the enemy of faith, but often doubt is the doorway to deeper belief. When questions arise, it does not mean faith is dying, it means faith is evolving. God is not threatened by your questions. He invites them because He knows that faith that has wrestled will be stronger than faith that has never been tested. The fracture gives you permission to be honest with God, and honesty is where real faith begins. The fracture also teaches faith to listen. When life is loud and successful, we tend to speak more than we hear, but broken seasons quiet the noise. In the stillness of pain, faith becomes attentive. You begin to notice God in whispers instead of wonders, in sustenance instead of spectacle. You discover that faith does not always look like miracles. Sometimes it looks like endurance. Sometimes faith is simply getting up one more day and choosing not to quit. Faith in the fracture becomes rooted instead of rushed. It is no longer obsessed with outcomes, but anchored in relationship. You stop chasing what God can do and start trusting who God is. This kind of faith is unshakable because it is not built on circumstances, it is built on character, God's character. When everything else breaks, faith clings to the unchanging nature of God. The fracture also produces compassion. When you have been broken, your faith becomes tender toward others. You stop judging struggles you have not lived through. You stop offering easy answers to complex pain. Faith grows a heart that can carry the weight of others' wounds because it remembers its own. Broken faith becomes healing faith, capable of ministering not from theory, but from experience. There is a humility that comes from fractured faith. You realize how much you need God, not just for blessings, but for breath. Pride cannot survive the fracture. Self-sufficiency collapses and dependence rises. Faith grows strongest when it knows it cannot survive on its own strength. This humility is not weakness. It is alignment. It places faith exactly where it belongs, resting in God rather than striving for control. Some of the strongest believers you will ever meet are not those who have avoided pain, but those who have endured it. Their faith is quiet but deep, steady but powerful. It has been tested by loss, refined by disappointment, and strengthened by perseverance. They know God not only as a provider, but as a sustainer. Their faith has learned how to live in the fracture and still believe. So if your life feels cracked right now, do not assume your faith is failing. It may be growing in ways you cannot yet see. The fracture is not the funeral of your faith, it is the formation of it. God is using the broken places to deepen your trust, mature your belief, and anchor your hope. Faith grows in the fracture, and when you emerge from this season, you will not just believe more loudly, you will believe more deeply. There are moments when life dismantles everything you thought was stable. Plans collapse, relationships fracture, opportunities disappear, and suddenly you are standing in the ruins of what once made sense. In those moments, it feels as though life has taken a hammer and struck the very foundation of your identity. You begin to question not only your direction, but your value. Yet what looks like destruction is often divine construction in progress. God has a history of building in places where life has broken things apart. Life tends to break what is fragile, temporary, or misaligned. God, however, builds what is eternal. When life breaks you, it exposes the limitations of structures that could never hold the weight of your destiny. God does not build on faulty foundations. Sometimes He allows what is unstable to fall so He can establish something stronger in its place. What you call loss, God often calls clearing. What you see as collapse, God sees as preparation. We often ask God to preserve what we are comfortable with, but God is more concerned with what is correct. He will not reinforce something that would eventually fail you. If a relationship breaks, if a dream shatters, if a season ends abruptly, it may be because it could not support where He is taking you. God does not demolish your life out of cruelty, but out of care. He refuses to let you live beneath your potential by clinging to what is familiar but insufficient. Throughout Scripture, God consistently builds after breaking. He rebuilt Noah's world after the flood. He rebuilt Job's life after devastation. He rebuilt Jerusalem after exile. He rebuilt Peter after denial. And ultimately, He rebuilt humanity's hope after the cross. God is not intimidated by ruins. He is drawn to them. Broken places are not obstacles to God's work. They are opportunities for His power. God builds differently than life does. Life builds on appearance, momentum, and control. God builds on truth, surrender, and obedience. When life breaks you, it strips away illusions, false strength, misplaced trust, and counterfeit confidence. God uses that exposure to lay a new foundation rooted in faith. He rebuilds your character before He restores your circumstances. He strengthens your inner life before He expands your outer influence. The rebuilding process is rarely instant. God does not rush construction. He is intentional, precise, and patient. Each layer He adds is meant to last. While you are asking for quick restoration, God is focusing on deep transformation. He is not just fixing what broke, He is redesigning how you live, love, and trust. What emerges after God builds is not a patched version of the old you, but a renewed version shaped by wisdom and endurance. Life may break your confidence, but God builds courage. Life may break your expectations, but God builds discernment. Life may break your heart, but God builds compassion. Every area where you felt diminished becomes a site of development in God's hands. He does not waste pain. He repurposes it. The very places that hurt the most often become the places where you grow the strongest. God also builds community in broken places. When life breaks you, pride dissolves and vulnerability increases. You begin to realize you cannot rebuild alone. God uses this awareness to connect you with people who will support, challenge, and strengthen you. He builds through relationships, accountability, and shared faith. What isolation destroys, God restores through connection. As God builds, He teaches you how to maintain what He gives you. He shows you boundaries you never had, values you never practiced, and disciplines you once ignored. The breaking taught you what does not work. The building teaches you what will. God ensures that what He rebuilds is sustainable. He does not want you returning to the same cycles led to the breaking in the first place. There is also a confidence that comes from knowing God built what you stand on. When life builds something, life can take it away. But when God builds it, it endures. The storms may still come, but the structure holds. You walk with humility, but also with assurance, because you know your strength did not come from ease. It came from God's hand at work in your brokenness. Eventually, you look back and realize that if life had not broken you, God would not have had access to rebuild you the way He did. You see how your faith deepened, your priorities shifted, and your purpose clarified. You recognize that what felt like the end was actually the beginning of something more aligned, more grounded, and more powerful than before. So when life breaks you, do not assume God is finished. He is just getting started. He is building wisdom from your wounds, strength from your surrender, and purpose from your pain. The breaking was not your destruction. It was the doorway to divine reconstruction. And what God builds in the aftermath will be stronger, wiser, and more enduring than anything life could ever give or take away. Pain has a way of introducing itself without permission. It arrives unannounced, disrupts your rhythm, and leaves marks you never planned to carry. Pain does not ask if you are ready. It simply shows up and demands to be felt, and when it does, it often convinces you that weakness is all that remains. But pain is not the end of your story. It is the place where power is being formed. What hurts you is not meant to finish you. It is meant to forge you. Most of us associate power with strength, control, and victory. But God's definition of power is different. God's power is often revealed not in moments of dominance, but in moments of surrender. The Apostle Paul discovered this when he admitted his weakness and heard God say, "My strength is made perfect in weakness." Pain strips away false ideas of power so that real power can emerge. It removes the illusion that you can do everything on your own and replaces it with the truth that God's strength is enough. Pain humbles you in ways success never can. It teaches you how fragile life is and how deeply you need God. In pain, pride has no place to hide. Self-reliance collapses, and dependence on God becomes unavoidable. This humility is not humiliation. It is alignment. It places you in a position where God's power can flow freely through you. Power does not come from pretending you are unbroken. It comes from admitting you are human and trusting God to carry what you cannot. Pain also sharpens discernment. Before the hurt, you may have tolerated things that drained you, accepted relationships that weakened you, or pursued goals that were misaligned. Pain has a way of clarifying what truly matters. It teaches you what to release and what to protect. Out of pain comes wisdom, and wisdom is power. You no longer give your energy to what cannot sustain you. You no longer chase approval at the cost of your peace. Pain trains you to live with intention. There is a strength that develops when you survive what you thought would destroy you. Each time you endure, your resilience grows. You discover that you are stronger than you believed, not because you avoided pain, but because you lived through it. This resilience becomes power. It allows you to stand when others collapse, to keep going when quitting seems reasonable, and to believe when circumstances say otherwise. You stop being intimidated by hardship because you know it is not stronger than the God within you. Pain also produces authority. When you have walked through the fire and come out changed, your words carry weight. You no longer speak from theory, but from experience. Your testimony becomes a source of strength for others. People listen differently when they know you have suffered and survived. The pain you endured becomes the platform from which you empower others. What once wounded you now equips you. God often uses pain to awaken dormant gifts. In comfort, potential can remain buried. But pain has a way of calling things out of you that ease never would. Compassion deepens, faith strengthens, purpose clarifies. You begin to recognize that your pain has connected you to a calling greater than yourself. God does not waste suffering. He transforms it into influence, empathy, and leadership. Your pain becomes the birthplace of your power. There is also a spiritual authority that comes from pain endured with faith. The enemy expects pain to silence you, to weaken your trust, and to turn you away from God. But when you choose faith in the midst of pain, you disrupt that plan. You emerge with a confidence rooted not in circumstances, but in God's faithfulness. This kind of power cannot be shaken because it was forged in adversity. Pain teaches you how to pray with depth instead of desperation. Your prayers become less about comfort and more about alignment. You stop asking God to remove every struggle and start asking Him to refine you through it. This shift produces spiritual maturity. You walk with God not just for what He can give, but for who He is. That relationship becomes your greatest source of power. Eventually, you realize that pain has transformed how you see yourself. You are no longer defined by what happened to you, but by how God carried you through it. You stop seeing yourself as a victim and start recognizing yourself as an overcomer. Your confidence is quieter but stronger. You do not need to prove anything because you know what you survived. When pain turns into power, it does not erase the scars, it redeems them. The scars remind you of where you've been and how far God has brought you. They become symbols of victory, not shame. You wear them as evidence that pain did not have the final word. So if you are walking through pain right now, do not despair. Power is being developed in you. God is strengthening your faith, refining your character, and preparing you for impact. The pain is not pointless. It is shaping a strength that cannot be taken from you. What you are enduring today is producing a power that will sustain you tomorrow. Pain may have introduced itself without permission, but it will not leave without purpose. As we come to the close of this message, I want you to understand this one truth clearly: what life breaks, God never wastes. Every tear you cried, every night you questioned your strength, every moment you felt pressed, fractured, or emptied, none of it was in vain. The breaking was not the end of you. It was the doorway to becoming. Life may have broken you, but faith has been quietly building you the entire time. You were not abandoned in the breaking. You were not crushed by the pressure. Your faith did not die in the fracture. God did not step back when life fell apart. He stepped in. He built strength where weakness lived, purpose where pain lingered, and power where you once felt powerless. What looked like devastation was actually divine preparation. The scars you carry are not signs of defeat. They are proof of survival. They testify that you endured what should have destroyed you and came out with your faith intact. You are standing today not because life was easy, but because God was faithful. And that faith, tested, stretched, and refined, is now stronger than it has ever been. So when you leave this place, do not despise the broken chapters of your story. Honor them. They are the chapters where God did his deepest work. Walk forward knowing that what once hurt you has now equipped you, what once weakened you has now strengthened you, and what once tried to stop you has now positioned you. Life may break you, but faith builds you. It builds you to stand. It builds you to endure. It builds you to rise. And the same God who carried you through the breaking will walk with you into the future he has prepared. Stay faithful. Stay standing. And trust that what God has built in you will outlast anything life ever tries to tear down.